The panel has been discussing the spirituality and the forces of God, but I also believe that there are two forces that are here with us, that we do have our God that we can depend on, but there's also a power of darkness that we do need to be aware of. And that's where the choices begin.
Do you believe that you can choose between one or the other?
Most absolute, definitely.
Yeah. Now, Marianne Williamson says in her book, Return to Love, that we're always walking in the direction of one or the other, that all of your actions in life, either you're moving toward the darkness or you're moving toward the light.
That's right.
She calls it fear and love. There's this wonderful book called Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, which is, anyway, it's a gorilla talking, but anyway, it talks about one of the points it brings out is one of the mistakes that human beings make is believing that there is only one way to live, and that we don't accept that there are diverse ways of being in the world, that there are millions of ways to be a human being, and many ways, but many paths to what you call God. And her path might be something else, and when she gets there, she might call it the light. But her loving and her kindness and her generosity brings her, if it brings her to the same point that it brings you, it doesn't matter whether she called it God along the way or not.
And I guess the danger that could be in that, I mean, it sounds great on the onset, but if you really look at both sides,
there couldn't possibly be just one way. What about Jesus? What about Jesus?
You say there isn't only one way. There is one way and only one way, and that is through Jesus.
There couldn't possibly be with the millions of people in the world. There couldn't possibly be.
Because you say, you intellectualize it and say there isn't. If you don't believe that, you're all buying into the lie. But that means you're right.
Do you think that if you are somewhere on the planet, if you're somewhere on the planet and you never hear the name of Jesus, you never hear the name of Jesus, but yet you live with a loving heart, you lived as Jesus would have had you to live, you lived for the same purpose that Jesus came to the planet to teach us all, but you are in some remote part of the earth and you never heard the name of Jesus, you cannot get to heaven, you think?
And that is covered in the scriptures, too. People are talked about
Truly, that. God knows the heart.
Does God care about your heart, or God care about if you call his son Jesus?
Well, you know, Oprah, Jesus cannot come back until that gospel is preached in the four corners of this earth. So, figure it out.
Okay, I can't get into a religious argument with you.
It's not.
Again, everyone, welcome to week number 3 of our New Earth web class. And again, I thank you. Eckhart Tolle thanks you for joining us as we bring students and seekers together to discuss our latest book club selection, Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. We did something last week that was unprecedented. You said it's never been done before on television, where you just sit there in silence. And I thought a lot of people responded to the sense of connection from that. So you want to do that again?
Yes.
Let's do that again.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So you're going to lead us in silence.
And simply become aware that you are breathing. The air flows in and out, and you feel yourself breathing. Air flows in and out of the body.
In reading books such as Tolle's, it's really opened my eyes up to a new way of thinking, a new form of spirituality that doesn't always align with the teachings of Christianity. So my question is to you, Oprah, how have you reconciled these spiritual teachings with your Christian beliefs?
I've reconciled it because I was able to open my mind about the absolute indescribable hugeness of that which we call God. I took God out of the box because I grew up in the Baptist church, and there were, rules and, belief systems and doctrine. And I happened to be sitting in church in my late 20s, and I was going to this church where you had to get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, or you couldn't get a seat, and a very charismatic minister, and everybody was just, into the sermon. And this great minister was preaching about how great God was and how omniscient and omnipresent and God is everything. And then he said, and the Lord thy God is a jealous God. And I was, you know, caught up in the rapture of that moment until he said jealous. And something struck me. And I was like, I think about 27 or 28. I was thinking, God is all, God is omnipresent, God is all, and God's also jealous. God is jealous of me. And something about that didn't feel right in my spirit, because I believe that God is love and that God is in all things. And so that's when the search for something more than doctrine started to stir within me. And I love this quote that Eckhart has. This is one of my favorite quotes in chapter 1, where he says, "Man made God in his own image. The eternal, the infinite, and unnameable was reduced to a mental idol that you had to believe in and worship as my God or our God."
Jesus says, you are the light of the world. That means you are the consciousness in which the world appears, is seen.
So you believe what happens to us at death when the body dies? You don't have a belief.
I don't give it any thought.
You don't. God, in the essence of all consciousness, isn't something to believe. God is.
Yes.
God is. And God is a feeling experience, not a believing experience.
That's right.
And if your religion is a believing experience, if God for you is still about a belief, then it's not truly God.
No.
That's what you're saying. I have to tell you, in one day, 6 people told me about this DVD.
All right, it is called The Secret, and it's one of Oprah's new favorite things, a little movie that's sweeping the country one DVD at a time. People who see it say it'll change their lives for the better forever. And Amanda John visits a local place where people are learning exactly what The Secret is. It's sure to grab your attention. Ancient knowledge known to all wise men and women for eons. Knowledge suppressed, lost, forgotten, until now.
I've been given a glimpse of a great secret.
It became a film, a book. There's even a sequel in the works. Great modern thinkers explaining how to have the life you want.
What kind of a house do you want to live in?
Do you want to be a millionaire?
What kind of a business do you want to have?
Do you want more success?
What do you really want?
It can change the world.
Sonny Johnston knows the secret.
It was wavy in my head, too.
She holds classes in her Glendale office every Wednesday.
Focus on something that you love.
The students learn to focus their minds, and in the process, they discover what they really want.
I want to buy a house in 6 months, a new house, and in order for me to do that, I have to be busy at work.
Mike Atwell watched the film over a month ago. He says what he learned helped him achieve surprising and fast success in his work as a lone salesman.
I asked to be busy, and I got swamped. It was definitely one of those days I was just like, okay, this is what I asked for, I'm getting it, and it's going to get me where I want to be in 6 months.
I've seen it a couple times now.
Debbie Gibson also used The Secret to find a new career.
I'd always wanted to do something else with my life as far as my profession, and I could just visualize myself doing that and being that, and I went back to school and then ended up actually working for the person that I was inspired by.
You know, this secret gives you everything you want.
So what is The Secret? Turns out you've heard it before. They call it the law of attraction.
Your thoughts and your feelings create your reality.
But Sonny says most people don't know how to use it, or worse, don't believe it really works. That's why people like Mike and Debbie come to class and watch the movie, and with every little success, you realize how powerful the thoughts can be.
If you believe that it's hard, it is. If you believe it's going to be a challenge, it will be. If you believe that maybe it might work, then you'll start to see changes. So how do you make it happen? You have to believe it.
Info about Sonny and The Secret on our website. You can see more tonight on Oprah right here at 9 o'clock.
This is Tim with Moriel TV and Moriel Radio here live in England with Jacob Prasch. Jacob, Oprah made quite a hit at the Golden Globes. Some of them, people are even calling for her to be president. And she's part of this Me Too organization. And if Me Too means hung out with Harvey Weinstein, Me Too. That definitely summed up Oprah. A lot of people have questions now about Oprah's spirituality and those type of things. What are your thoughts on that?
Let's go back to Mississippi, where she was born, before she moved, I think, in her youth to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where she was sexually abused as a young girl. Afro-Americans in the post-slavery era, in the Jim Crow era, many of them were evangelical Christians, Pentecostals, and Baptists. Admittedly, in any Bible Belt, anywhere in the world, could be Korea, could be the American South, could be Northern Ireland, admittedly, there are people who go to churches that have an evangelical statement of faith but are not born again. It's a cultural evangelicism. Although the doctrines are there and the gospel might be preached in the church, it has more to do with culture. And going to church and getting dressed up and singing and all this can have more to do with culture than it actually does with personal faith. That is true in any Bible Belt of any race and any nation. Nonetheless, a number of these people, including Afro-Americans, a number were truly saved. Even in the United States today, if you witness to black people, you'll be amazed, we'd be amazed, how many of them have grandmothers who are saved Christians praying for their salvation, Pentecostal grandmothers or something like that, praying for their salvation. There are very few black people who do not have believers in their family, Native American blacks. Very few who do not have it in their ancestry. And Oprah Winfrey would not be an exception. I'm often reminded of the story of Muddy Waters in the Mississippi Delta, went to see his mother. And she came out on the porch with the apron on and everything, and, you know, and he went up to her, and he was all dressed in a fancy suit and pulled up in a limousine and hugged her. And he had a fistful of money, including a $500 bill, which she'd never seen before, and a whole lot of hundreds and fifties. And he stuffs it in the pocket of her apron. And she takes the money and throws it back. After she hugs him, she begins crying, "You're a backslider. This is the devil's money. You're singing the devil's music." Now, these were holiness Pentecostals. That was something ingrained in many of them. I think Muddy Waters was a talented man, and I don't have a problem with people singing the blues, but I also understand where his mother was coming from. She was a true believer. Now, again, in those traditions, holiness can become easily confused with legalism and so forth. We know that. But what I'm saying is there are no black people from the American South of Oprah Winfrey's generation or mine who do not have saved Christians in their family and in their ancestry, who do not know the gospel. It's similar to Northern Ireland. They all know it. Even the white founders of rock and roll who imitated the black rhythm and blues artists, Buddy Holly and Elvis Presley, all these people, they knew the gospel. It was in their environment, in their culture. Well, she came from that. But obviously, she no longer believes it. She is New Age. She is essentially pantheistic. She's made statements that fundamentally deny the essential truths of the Christian faith. She is a person who turned away from the faith of her forebears. Whether or not she was personally ever regenerate and is a backslider, I do not know. But I do know the faith of her forebears was genuine, was sincere, and she's rejected it in favor of the world and of the lies of Satan and New Age. And we're all one. These things are absolutely demonic. And the spirit of Antichrist is preparing the world for the coming of Antichrist. There is no doubt that Oprah Winfrey has been one of the key agents of Satan, animated by the spirit of Antichrist to prepare the world for the great deception that's coming. This is the reality. It is a great national tragedy. The abolitionist movement came from Christian churches in the north of the United States. People like D.L. Moody, the evangelists, were abolitionists. The abolitionists of the South, who helped blacks escape on the Underground Railroad, and they were motivated by Christian values. Initially, the civil rights movement as defined and pioneered by people like Booker T. Washington, a man for whom I have incredibly high regard. These were people who I esteemed. They were way before Martin Luther King. Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King was a Baptist clergyman. All of these people had Christian influences, okay? So abolitionism and civil rights came from Christianity. Black America, too much of it, has turned from Christ to crack cocaine. They're looking to Farrakhan, to the Nation of Islam, for a new spiritual direction in many cases. Look at Africa. Google Slavery International. See where slavery is practiced in the 21st century. Black Africa, Mauritania, Chad, Sudan, Niger. What color are the slaves? Black. Who owns them? Muslims.
What I want to know is why, when Christianity started in the 1st century, we don't see them going into Africa. We know that Africa was aware of that Christianity started in Africa.
Christians you mean?
We know that Christianity was in Africa from the 1st century.
Amen.
We know that by the 4th century, Christianity was the state religion of Ethiopia. We know it's the state religion of Nubia. We know that there was a strong hold of Christianity in Africa.
Amen.
A stronghold. What happened in the 7th century? Islam. What happened in the 8th century?
What happened?
Expansion into Africa.
How?
Expansion into Europe. Expansion into
into
India.
Africa.
Yes,
and what happened? And what happened? And what happened?
Well, let me give you Nubia, for example. Nubia is, by the way, modern-day Sudan.
All right.
Nubia was a Christian country. And Muslims kept attacking them. Kept attacking them and attacking them and attacking them. And then they said, okay, we will not attack you if you send over 300 and so slaves every single year.
Whoa.
Yeah? And so when the Islam expansion continued throughout Africa into Europe, for then the response to be the Crusades, who do you think joined in the Crusades against Islam? Nubia. Nubia joined in the Crusades against Islam.
Nubia, oh my God.
So the Africans actually joined in against Islam.
Nubia.
Yeah, to push Islam back.
Yeah.
How many years has slavery existed in Africa, in Islamic Africa?
So we don't see Christians enslaving people in Africa. 1st century, 4th century, all the way up to the 15th century. What happened before that?
Happened?
We see Islam from the 7th century all the way up until the 20th century.
In the 21st century. It still exists today.
Yes.
So
what we see is
Speak to me about Christians.
No, you asked. You talked about slavery. Did you not? You talked about slavery.
Okay.
Who were the ones who were enslaving? Who were the ones who were the main traders? Arab Muslims. Yeah. Who were the ones when the British came and the Portuguese came and the Spanish came? Who were the ones that they interacted with? Yes, the native people, but a lot of it was the Arab Muslims. Who did they learn the whole trade from?
Okay. So you're saying you're claiming that the Christian Europeans learned how to conduct slavery from the Muslims.
I'm saying that the British, the Spanish, the Portuguese learnt it from them. But was that the example of Jesus? Absolutely not. There's a reason why it came on the back of greed.
So you're saying
there's a reason why
these
Jesus,
white Christians
let me finish. Let me finish. There's a reason Jesus never had any slaves. Did his disciples take slaves? No. There was a movement to actually free slaves in Christianity.
There was the same in Islam.
Let's back up. Let's look at the years now. Really, slavery came to Europe in 1400 AD, right?
Yeah.
Slavery really was practiced 1400 AD and then was eradicated in 1800 AD. So slavery only existed for 400 years amongst the Europeans, right? How long did slavery exist amongst Muslims? How long did slavery exist in Islamic countries?
Teach your sister the slavery system.
So it was there in the 7th century.
Teach your sister the
Officially,
slavery.
we see the last Islamic countries ending
You have to listen to your master.
Your
master is teaching your history.
Okay, let's stop right there.
When your master is talking.
Now listen, right here. This man, are you a Muslim? Are you a Muslim?
No.
Why do you think that I'm her master?
You're her master.
Why?
Definitely. I'm the person everybody knows.
Jesus is my master.
Why is it for Muslims, whenever they see a black person, they automatically always assume that I am her master.
Yes.
Why is this a default for every Muslim? Why is it this a default for every Muslim here?
Because the white man came to Africa. We never have another English.
So before the white man came to Africa, Christianity was already there.
He built Christianity. He built Christianity.
So when did slavery exist and begin in Africa for Islam?
When you came to Africa.
It began in the 7th century,
yes,
right?
You
so
came
this
to
is
Africa.
700 years.
Yes.
Before, this is actually 800 years before the Europeans even got into slavery.
I don't believe it. I just really want to get this timeline straight.
Exactly.
I can't believe how,
I
can't believe after all this time there's still so many misconceptions. Christianity has been in Africa
he brought Christianity
since the first century. Since the first century.
And we are both created in God's image. The black and the white together. Oh, I love that. That means we're going to be with God forever. There is no distinction between man and me. There is no difference between man or woman, slave or free, Greek or Jew. All are equal in Jesus Christ.
There is a distinction. Don't lie.
That's why we can preach this today.
Mr. Christian.
God bless you. I'm so glad you came.
In the 21st century, you've got the enslavement of blacks taking place in Islamic cultures and societies. The first countries to abolish slavery were Christian. The last ones to abolish slavery were Muslim, except they haven't abolished it yet. Yet Black America is turning to this. Following Farrakhan, the heir of Elijah B. Muhammad, who was responsible by popular report within the black community of America for the assassination of Malcolm X. It's ridiculous what has happened to Black America, turning from the faith of their forebearers that gave them abolition and civil rights to go into what they're going into, open godlessness. In the late 1940s, no more than 1 out of 10 Afro-American children were born out of wedlock. It would have been a disgrace because of their religious and family values based on Scripture. Today, 3 out of 4 are born out of wedlock. There is a moral avalanche within America, and it has particularly hit the minorities, especially Black America. This is a national tragedy. The Scripture has a very different view of black people than what we see now. While there was one bad king of Ethiopia, the Hebrew word for black African is an Ethiopian, a Cushite, someone from the land of Cush. They didn't know about the Congo or about Kenya, or they didn't know about, Zambia, but they knew about Ethiopia. Black African is called a Cushite. If we count the Samaritans as semi-Jews, Jesus said, take the gospel from Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria to the ends of the earth. The first person from a non-Jewish background to become a Christian, of which we have a biblical record, is a black African, the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts chapter 8. The first person converted to Christ from a non-Jewish world, if we count the Samaritans, was a black African. It was a black African who rescued Jeremiah from the cistern when his own people threw him in it and left him for dead. It was the black African messenger who was faithful at the death of Absalom, not Ahimaaz. The scriptures speak quite positively about black people. Black Africa accepted Christianity rather quickly. Now, we can go into all kinds of things of the history of it and so forth with David Livingstone and so forth and the missionaries, but there is a strong African Christian heritage that came to the United States and that helped spawn black liberation in terms of civil rights and before that abolition. There's no question about this. No question about this. It was also true in Great Britain. John Wesley, John Newton, these people were evangelical preachers who radically opposed the institution of slavery in the British Empire. Well, Oprah Winfrey had the privilege of coming from that noble heritage and background, but she's rejected it in favor of the world, New Age, polyreligiosity. psychobabble, pseudo-spiritual, psychologized pseudo-spirituality, anything that comes down the pike. That's her background. I don't know, again, if she was ever saved, but I know there were people in her family who would have been, and I know what the religious heritage of her family was, and she has left it. As have many others, but she is in a unique position. There is nobody who cannot admire a woman born in basic poverty in the American South at a time when Jim Crow was just ending, when there was still bigotry against blacks. Now, there's no more institutionalized bigotry against blacks, only there's individual bigots. But then it was ending. She still caught the tail end of Jim Crow and its aftermath. To come from that background, born poor, to have been sexually violated as a teenager in Milwaukee, all the cards stacked against her, and to wind up the most famous woman in media, in the history of media, a self-made billionaire, $3 billion in assets. We have to admire that. If somebody wants to talk about the American dream, they can look at Oprah Winfrey. Okay. And it proves to me that blacks don't need reverse discrimination like affirmative action. She got where she is because of her talent and her work, not because of her skin color. If she ever becomes president, however, it'll be largely because of her skin color.
And a Fox News contributor. Congressman, good to see you. It's amazing to see someone as successful as Oprah Winfrey. I mean, a billionaire, thanks in large part to American viewers loving her. White, black, brown, you name it, loving her, talking about racist Americans.
Yes, and thanks and pleasure to be with you, Megan. It is absolutely appalling and unconscionable that you would have Oprah Winfrey, who is a billionaire by all regards, and then you have the first African-American president, and they're both continuing to try to use the race card to talk about the failures and the faults, not in his racial content, but in the content of his character and the failure of his policies. And based upon what Oprah Winfrey described as being a racist, well, then I guess I'm a racist as well, because I don't agree with those policies. But what is really interesting is how, Oprah Winfrey or, Morgan Freeman or some of the others, when black conservatives are attacked viciously by white liberals, you don't hear anything from them. Or when Harry Reid can come out and say that he accepts the president because he's light-skinned and he doesn't use Negro dialect, that's accepted language coming from the left. So there is an incredible hypocrisy, and really it is setting race relations back in the United States of America.
It's amazing because when the only example she offered of disrespect based on race was what we believe is the Joe Wilson incident, where he called out "you lie" when the president was giving a State of the Union address, and he said that illegal immigrants were not going to get, I think, health care coverage under Obamacare. Sure. And Joe Wilson yelled out "you lie." All right? So that's her incident of disrespect based on race. Now, in a court of law, that would not fly. There is nothing in that exchange to suggest it's based on race. But some of the other incidents you point to, and even, I mean, didn't Joe Biden once refer to then candidate Barack Obama? Yeah. He's so clean and articulate. Yes. Now that would fly in a court of law. And yet, she seems to be. Where is the evidence that the president's critics, and she's not talking about crazy internet, critics from the Sounders. She's talking about Joe Wilson, are basing their upset on race.
Well, there doesn't have to be any evidence for the people on the left. And understand, when you call out the race card, that is the last line of defense for them to try to get you to back off, because no one wants to be called a racist, and that's the means by which you try to silence people. And really, that is a suppression of your freedom of speech in this great nation in which we live. So this is a tactic that comes from the Saul Alinsky Rules for Radicals school of thought, which, of course, was born out of Chicago, which is where the president is from. And if we continue to allow people to throw this against us, Robert Redford just recently did it as well, then we're going to allow the president to believe that he can do and say say whatever he wishes and whatever he wants. And you just had Congressman DeSantis on, and you showed that video of what the president said as a candidate back in 2008, how he was going to honor the Constitution, and look at the things that he has done now.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how her ratings have gone down. I heard her TV success has struggled since she did get political and started making certain statements like this. I mean, there's no question there are some racist people out there, and some people criticize the president based on racist views, but the example she used was telling, and it was interesting to see her honored today. Colonel West, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Megan.
She has made statements that I consider to be racist.
As long as people can be judged by the color of their skin, the problem's not solved. There are still generations of people, older people, who were born and bred and marinated in that prejudice and racism, and they just have to die.
And that others consider racist. Some of the films she's been in are revisionist. They're not accurate portrayals of history and what happened. And they tend to stereotype and characterize all white people as being a certain way, which is not the case. Find me another country where 1 out of 8 people were killed or wounded in the Civil War trying to end slavery. You're not going to find it. It's ridiculous. But she's played that card. Now let's look further. Again, she's a media mogul, the most powerful and popular woman in the history of media. If we go back to the age of Cecil B. DeMille, to the earliest days of Hollywood in the 1920s, to the earliest days of Hollywood, I mean when Charlie Chaplin and Harold Lloyd were around, before the 1920s, but certainly let's count from the 1920s. When Musso and Franks first opened on Hollywood Boulevard. If we go back to the earliest days of Hollywood, couch casting was commonplace and commonly known. It was known in the 1920s, the 1930s, the 1940s, the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s, and into the 21st century. It is not new. It has always existed, and everybody knows it has always existed. There's nothing unique about Harvey Weinstein. Yes, he's a bad man, but there's nothing unique about it. Why? A couple of decades of the highest profile media exposure possible. Did Oprah Winfrey never address this issue until now? She addressed all kinds of other issues, sometimes fake issues. But she never addressed Hollywood couch casting and what goes with it. Never. Never. Not once. She worked with Weinstein in film productions. As we see in the media, everybody's saying, we always knew he did this. She didn't. She worked with him so closely, but she never said a word about couch casting, let alone about Weinstein. She opened that girls' school in South Africa. Now, our ministry hasn't worked with AIDS kids in South Africa. We know what happened. Those sexual scandals in her school were unspeakable. To the degree that she may have known about it was to blame for not stopping it sooner, that is debated by some people. We don't know.
They didn't use the word sexual abuse. They implied that something inappropriate was going on. Hearing that, John Samuel, immediately after hearing that allegation, removed the accused, Tiny Makopo, from the campus. I was, needless to say, devastated and really shaken to my core when I first heard this news. And immediately within the first hour of receiving this information, I contacted here in the United States Dr. Bruce Perry, who is founder of the Child Trauma Academy in Houston, Texas. And Dr. Perry informed me that the law in the United States requires that one must report, even if you suspect child abuse, it must be reported. to the Child Protective Services. And so he said, if I were you, I would confirm if that is also the law in South Africa, which I did. And first thing Monday morning, I contacted Superintendent Neitling and told him that I wasn't sure what had happened, but there was a suspicion on the part of the girls of some type of sexual abuse. I told Andre Neitling that I wanted to conduct an independent investigation to determine what exactly had happened, and that I would appreciate his advice and his guidance in this matter. And he told me that his department would work in cooperation with our independent investigation. Now, the reason why I did that is I wanted to hire an independent team because my experience with child predators is that no one ever abuses just one child. Although the girls only had spoken of one classmate, my first priority was to determine how many girls had actually been affected and to what extent. So I hired a team of 3 headed by Robert Farley, who is a former detective and commander of the Child Exploitation Unit at the Cook County Sheriff's Office here in Chicago. Detective Farley and his team immediately flew over from the United States. They spent a week interviewing girls and staff. I arrived before the team. I was accompanied by Dr. Bruce Perry, and I spoke to all the girls personally, and I encouraged all of them, any of them who had actually been harmed, to please come forward and to trust the team and speak to the team and the police. And I told them that although they had apparently been living in an atmosphere that repressed their voices, that this was a chance for them to break the silence and to take their voices back. As a result of that conversation with the girls, by the next day, 5 other brave girls had come forward. But all the girls were afraid of repercussions from the remaining dorm matrons. So we immediately removed all remaining dorm matrons and put teachers in rotation in the dorms. That weekend, which was Sunday, October 14th, we had enough information by that time about the specific nature of the girls' complaints that we then started calling all of their parents to inform them of the situation and to ask for a meeting the following weekend. Then the following weekend of October 20th, I returned again to South Africa, and I met with the parents and their daughters. I apologized for the unfortunate circumstances that we are enduring, and I promised to institute immediate changes to create a new model of excellence in social, emotional, and academic life for girls at the school. This has been one of the most devastating, if not the most devastating experience of my life. But like all such experiences, there's always much to be gained, and I think there's a lot to be learned. And as Mr. Samuel said, we are moving forward to create a safe, an open, and a receptive environment for the girls. And I'm also very grateful to their parents and to their guardians and their caretakers for their continued trust and their support in me and also in the school. What I know is that no one, not the accused, nor any persons, can destroy the dream that I have held and the dream that each girl continues to hold for herself at this school. And I am prepared to do whatever is necessary to make sure that the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls becomes the safe, the nurturing, and enriched setting that I had envisioned. A place capable of fostering the full measure of these girls' productivity, of their creativity, and of their humanity. It will become a model for the world. With each girl who graduates, we will show that the resilience of the human spirit is actually stronger than poverty, it's stronger than hatred, it's stronger than violence, it's stronger than trauma and loss, and it's also stronger than any abuse. No matter what adversity these girls have endured in their short lives, and let me assure you, they have endured a lot. Their lights will not be diminished by this experience. So I would like to, at this time, recognize the courage and the leadership already demonstrated by those 15 students who came forward and reported the abusive dorm matron to the CEO of our academy. These 15 girls banded together, and they acted because they felt that previously their voices had not been heard by other adults on campus. And now, thanks to what I now call the Owl Leg 15, we are all here, where a horrible situation has been uncovered and rooted out. They represent, those 15 girls, the new generation of youth in South Africa who fearlessly take back their voices to speak up about their concern for their fellow classmates. This is really what we're trying to teach. This is what leadership is all about, to use your voice, no matter what the personal consequences, so that abuse will end and good will prevail. I continue to be proud of them and of every girl in our school.
But for all people, given the fact she had a sexual scandal in her own charity, working with Weinstein all of those years, the most powerful woman in media, 10 years, 20 years plus, doesn't say a word about this issue until it becomes politically expedient. If there was a Golden Globe award for hypocrisy, Oprah Winfrey should get it. Then we have Hollywood hypocrisy generally. It's not just Oprah. Roman Polanski, a fugitive from justice, sexually violated an underage girl, multiple others by the claims of the victims, but one that he fled justice to Europe, been hiding overseas for years. Meryl Streep signs a petition to let him back into the USA and immunize him from prosecution for both the sex crime and for fleeing justice. She signs a petition. And when he appears by satellite relay, she stands up and she claps. Yes, Meryl Streep should get the Oscar for hypocrisy. And Oprah Winfrey should get the Golden Globe for hypocrisy. This is the realities. Hollywood is as phony as a $3 bill. It is an industry with no scruples and no morals. All of this is based on hypocrisy and dual standards. It's always gone on. It's not about morality or stopping couch casting. They're never going to stop it. I've seen this in the music industry. You don't have to take advantage of groupies. They're going to throw themselves at you. Same thing happens in Hollywood. They wouldn't know where to draw the line between couch casting and consensual fornication. It's a quagmire. It's always been there. She was working. Oprah Winfrey was working with Weinstein for years. Now we read everybody knew about him and what he was doing. Yeah. But she didn't say or do anything until it became advantageous to her. But the corrupt media machine and the stupidity of the people, the lowest common denominator, who watch the networks and who watch things like CNN and MSNBC, the lowest common denominator, and the idiocracy that runs the mainstream media and most universities, make it possible that that woman could be nominated. I pray to God as a Christian, it doesn't happen. That woman is nothing but a hypocrite. She's turned from the faith of her fathers, and she's an instrument of the devil. I pray she repents and returns to the faith of her forebears. Thank you for listening. My name is James Jacob Prasch.
Lifting up Jesus, opening his word from Australia, Denmark, Israel, Japan, New Zealand, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, Singapore, South Africa, United Kingdom, Thailand, the Philippines, United States, and throughout the world. You're watching Moriel TV.